Got enough in the room for the quorum. We got 8.
That's all that matters. You're pretty all over it.
Okay, I'll call to order the committee of the whole meeting for March 24th, 2026. First item on our agenda tonight is roll call.
Barraza, Lancy, Beck, here. Millay, Malone,
Here.
Solfa, Wolf,
Here.
Aaron, here. Lehman, Lohman, here. Keeper, here. Fehrenbach,
Here.
Anderson, here. White,
Here.
that's 9.
Okay, up next would be a reminder, if you come up tonight to talk to us, make sure that you adjust the mic and you can see the little green light come on, so we know that you're being broadcast and recorded for the BATV. Next would be item 3, which is approval of the minutes from March 10th, 2026 and March 16th, 2026 special meeting. Any changes or notes or changes? Can I get a motion to recommend to council the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second. Set. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Up next would be items removed, added, or changed. Do we have anything for this evening? Anderson?
Thinking the state housing bill, do we want to push that off to the next committee of the whole, just knowing that we have people down in Springfield now talking to local politicians about the bill? Does that make sense to maybe postpone that discussion?
I would be okay with that if anybody else wants to join in on that. I think, we see something almost every day. It seems like that's coming out of that, and the fact that we do have 4 people down there today, it would be nice to.
I do believe there are some folks in the audience that might be here for it.
Yes.
Anyway, so we might as well have the start tonight and keep going.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
We can keep it short. If you
Yeah, we'll just try to keep it short tonight, and then that way we can have the rest of the information next meeting. Okay, and then we will leave the agenda as is and move on to item 5, which is matters from the public for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. Is there anybody here for anything not on the agenda? Come on up and use the microphone. All we need is your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Stevens. I'm on the board of the Prairie Commons Townhomes, and I wanted to know the status of the water retention problem on Bent's Way. Given that the city has returned the builder's bond, I wanted to know how that would be handled going forward.
Maintenance on it?
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
Are you talking about the maintenance on the retention pond?
There's a water retention problem on the city street near the alleyways.
I'm not aware of it. I guess I'd have to talk to
It's my understanding
Public Works.
that it's been brought up with the city.
Okay, do you know who they talk to, either at Public Works or Street Department? Not sure.
Sorry about that. We are actually working with Lennar to finish up punch list items. I know we had worked with them last fall. They were going to perform a survey of the areas that you're talking about, and then we were going to try to figure out what needed to be done. They needed to figure out what needed to be done in order to address the issue that you're talking about.
So is there someone we should reach out to for further status updates directly?
You can certainly reach out to engineering and we can get you status updates. We're waiting for Lennar to provide a survey for us and then a game plan as to how they're going to fix the issue that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for matters not on the agenda? Okay, and then we'll move into the consent agenda. Baron?
Thank you. The consent agenda reads as follow. Approvals. Resolution 2026-38-R, authorizing execution of a 1-year renewable contract for 2026 code enforcement abatement mowing with WA Management, Inc. of West Chicago. I move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 7.1 is Resolution 2026 39R, donation of the old Pierce dash fire engine, including declaring surplus property, hold harmless, and indemnification. And I don't think I'm going to read through all of that.
I wouldn't.
We'll save
There's
that
a lot of pages.
We'll save that for the council meeting.
Yeah, the simple summary is we have an old fire engine, a 2000 Pierce Dash. It was replaced 2 years ago. Excuse me. It needs about $20,000 in work to make it DOT and NFPA compliant. We've reached out to all the area fire colleges and schools, and we finally were able to locate one that was willing to put the work into the engine if we were willing to donate it as is. So basically, we're looking for the council to declare it surplus, to a hold harmless as is, as we've done in the past with the Fox Valley Career Center and Canelan's Fire Department when they needed it, and then go ahead and make the donation.
Have any questions? As Chief alluded to, we have done this before and donated it to school out at the Fox Valley Career Center, so I just think it is a good thing to do. That way it does get used, it just doesn't get scrapped. Okay. Questions? I'll make the motion that we recommend to council resolution 2026-39R, donation of the old 2000 Pierce Dash fire engine, including declaring surplus property, hold harmless, and indemnification. Second. Wolf, second by Lone. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll probably put that on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Up next would be item 7.2, which is resolution 2026-40R, authorization to purchase one new Ford truck for the fire department response in the amount of $65,689. Chief?
Yes, this is just part of our replacement program for response vehicles. This one will replace our reserve Ford Expedition Command Unit, which we are looking at then moving down to ESDA, which would replace a previous command unit, which is a 1990 Ford Expedition, which is currently within the ESDA fleet within the fire department. Now, that's subject to mechanical review and things on those surplus vehicles. We try to keep the most usable vehicles until the end of their mechanical life, essentially.
Do you have any questions? This has always worked pretty well for us to, just move into one other department rather than buy a new vehicle for each department when we move out of one.
6 is a pretty old vehicle. So I don't think that's fair.
Shows how long they take care of stuff and how well they take care of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, no other questions. I'll make the motion that we recommend to council resolution 2026-40R, authorizing purchase of one new pickup truck for the fire department response in the amount of $65,689.
Seconded.
White. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. That again could go on consent.
Consent? Thank you very much, Chairman.
And then 7.3, which is resolution 2026-41R, authorizing the purchase of one new utility interceptor hybrid for the fire marshal in the amount of $63,615. Chief?
Yes, this is going to be a replacement for our fire marshal's vehicle. We've talked for a couple of years about trying to get hybrids within our fleet. This would be an opportunity to bring a hybrid in at an administrative level. Most of, like the last vehicle we just approved, most of them are needed for towing and more of a heavy-duty operation, but this will give us a hybrid opportunity, and it's from the same purchaser that we've purchased the last 6 police cars from. So that's why it's a different resolution and a different vendor at this point in time.
Questions? It'd be fun seeing if you guys fight over this like the police fight over the new interceptors.
They love them. They swear by them. They've liked them. They've had them for 2 years, and that's partly why we're doing business with Curry Motors. They've had great success with them, and the vendor. So we're following suit.
Make a motion that we recommend to council Resolution 2026-41R, authorizing purchase of one new utility interceptor hybrid vehicle for the fire marshal in the amount of $63,615.
Seconded.
Motion by Wolf, second by White. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Again, that can go on consent.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
All right, and we will move on to item 7.4, which is a discussion on the safe routes to school sidewalk on Willow Lane and Blue Stem Lane. And a project update.
Thank you all. Give me 1 second.
Sure. And just for the audience and everybody watching, this is one of the things that we've done over the past probably decade, where we've gone with Safe Routes to School programs, where we go out and try and get additional money from outside the city in the form of grants, so that way we can connect better routes to the schools and to the routes that are already there. So this is trying to fill in the gaps along the way between majority of the housing and the schools.
I don't know if this is sharing. Oh, let's see. Can you guys see that are online? I don't know if you guys can see that.
No, we can't see
it. I think if you go into Zoom and hit share.
Right there, share.
Let's see.
There you go.
Which one is it?
See it now.
We can see it now. We see it now.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, I just wanted to bring up, this is the PowerPoint presentation that we had at our public meeting on March 10th. Thank you for Alderman Sulfa and Alderman Barron for attending and speaking with some of the residents that came to that meeting. I just wanted to give a quick update on this project. We've been working on this for a couple of years, finally getting this hopefully out the door. Just a quick update. This is a new sidewalk project for Willow Lane and Blue Stem Lane. We had our public meeting March 10th. This project addresses that neighborhood in general has a lot of sidewalk gaps. It's somewhat close to Rotolo School or Rotolo Middle School, but a lot of the kids that are in that area still are not bused. They have to walk to school. So this is a nice project for them to have a sidewalk. This project also was identified in the 2023 Bicycle and Ped Plan. We applied for funding back in 2022 or 2023 for Safe Routes to School funding, and we did get awarded in 2024 $250,000, which is great. It helps supplement some of our all of our sidewalk projects. At the public meeting, we presented just concept locations for the sidewalk. Right now, we haven't done any survey yet, so we're thinking it's going to go both on Willow and Blue Stem on the west side. But once we get into the actual survey, we'll be able to kind of sort that out. A couple of the comments that we got from residents were funding questions. Who's paying for this? Are residents that are on the streets going to have to pay extra for the sidewalk? And the answer is no. We're going to cover this either through our current budget, or either that, or also through the $250,000 grant that we got. Some people called and actually wanted to say, is there a way we can extend it further? Because we're only going up between Chillum and Lexington. We would love to take that further, but it's not really part of the project. In the future, we'll definitely be looking at extending, especially on Blue Stem. We would love to extend up to Woodland Hills. And on the radar also is to extend the sidewalk along Lexington. There's no sidewalk there right now. And we would love to continue that in the future. So hopefully not too long before we get onto the next phase. Overall, the comments that we got from residents were, we had questions, how is it going to impact their yard, that kind of thing, their driveways. But overall, the feedback was pretty positive, I would say. So our next steps are to issue an RFQ to engineering consultants. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll pick a consultant and then come back to you guys with the consultant that we've picked for your approval. Our timeline for this project is design hopefully later this year and into 2027. If everything goes really well, we would start in construction in late 2027, but that would be a push. It's more likely this would be a project that would start in early 2028. And we're looking forward to get started. It's going to be a nice project. So if there's any questions, I can answer your questions.
I mean, I'll just make a comment. These residents have had a lot of construction going on in their area just because of everything going on with, was it sewer that was put down and water? And these are long-term residents. They've been there, they've raised their kids there, they've been in there like for 40 years, neighbors and everything. And they came out and just were as delightful as can be and had their I know for my group, they had their main question answered, and they're like, all right, where are we going for drinks now? Just a great neighbors, very grateful. I mean, they're the ones that are pushing like, well, how about the corner? The kids come around the corner and, they're concerned for the kids in the area and, wanting to get the kids back in the area. Of course, all neighborhoods go through those phases. So, yeah.
I think it's going to be a nice project.
And staff did a great job. You guys did a great job interacting with the residents and answering their questions and having all the information available for them. So kudos to you guys.
Just a point of reference, if you're going to go through the exercise of having an engineering firm review this, I would review Blue Stem all the way to Woodland Hills. It doesn't make sense to do a peninsula sidewalk that goes out to nothing if you're 6 houses away from the next sidewalk. Close the loop.
Yeah, 100%. This was done, and I wasn't part of the application, so I don't know why the termini was there. But when we get into working with IDOT, they're very clear about where you can extend it. So if we can't necessarily extend the termini without going through.
I would do everything I can to try to make it part of the proposal.
We would try.
If we can't, we can't.
Or if we have to, we'll figure out a way to do it as a separate project and perhaps closely after we do this next phase. So 100%, we're hearing from some of the residents that are in that area saying, hey, we have kids that are going to need to go to Rotolo and we would love to have a sidewalk. So that's definitely very high on our priority list.
Thank you for the update.
Yep, thank you.
On to 7.5, which is a discussion on the state housing bill. I don't know who was going to start that off. Is that?
I would be happy to talk about what our experience has been here in Springfield today, talking about this legislation.
Go ahead.
We had some really great discussions today. The Metro West Drive Down is an opportunity for the 27 communities that are part of Metro West to get audience with the leaders in both the House and the Senate. Today, we met with the Speaker of the House, Chris Welch. We met with President of the Senate, Don Harmon. We also met with Representative McCombie and Senator Curran. So we had an opportunity to speak about this legislation with the leadership in both houses. And throughout our conversations, it was expressed that this is very much in the beginning stages. Everyone seemed to realize that it's very difficult to enact legislation of this kind, which paints all communities in Illinois with a broad brush. Several of the communities that are part of Metro West are on well and septic, for instance, and increasing the density has a severe impact on the ability of that kind of infrastructure infrastructure to provide service to the type of housing that they want to encourage. It was definitely Metro West's position that they were supportive of the intent of the legislation, but that they felt that there should be some consideration given to how there may be unintended consequences for municipalities that when the lawmakers will want to consider prior to finalizing the legislation. So there's very much, it is in discussion phases right now, and it's a good opportunity for us to provide input to the legislators who are working on the Build Act pieces of legislation. So our timing was very good to be down here in Springfield to express our concerns. And I think that we have earned a seat at the table for future discussions in giving input into what ultimately will be the legislation. I would say that the sentiment is that this legislation will be passed in some form, but not in its current form. That people say there probably is a lot of work that needs to be done on the wording of the legislation. So more to come.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments right now on this? All right.
We'll wait until public.
One second, sir. We'll have public comment in just a minute after we discuss this.
I was going to say part of the reason I asked that we have this discussion is so far conversation from folks that we've heard, especially the mayor and parts of council have suggested a lot of initial concern, but I felt like a lot of voices weren't being heard from when I've talked to people in the community who are actually kind of excited about this. So I felt it would be worthwhile to have a public conversation. And this doesn't have to be the only one because I know there's a few folks missing here, but the idea was that there are benefits to this, and there are even benefits that I might get into as the conversation unfolds to this being a statewide thing, while also understanding the concerns about local control that this kind of butts up against. And I think it's worthwhile to talk about how this could actually benefit Batavia in some ways. So that's kind of my opening statement of why we're having this conversation now. We can get into specifics as we go through, but I'll let other folks kind of mention their kind of initial perspectives.
Fehrenbach?
I think any conversation around this needs to take in the bill in its entirety. I think this is why these bills are very easy to pick one thing and just focus on that, when in fact it's across the board. I mean, this impacts everything from school districts to homeowners to new buyers, the city of Batavia, just everything across the board, to infrastructure costs, to unfunded mandates. It just, this is such a large bill. I find it disappointing that that the state is admitting that it needs to change when they proposed it before asking municipalities, for the changes before they proposed it. So I feel like I agree there's probably changes coming, just based on the overall scope of what I'm seeing. And I'm not sure how far we really want to get into this today, given that, but that's my take.
Well,
yeah, overall, very generally, I'm pretty excited that this bill is coming forward, and a lot of the provisions in it, I think, will be very beneficial to the state in general, but really Batavia specifically. I think Alderman Fehrenbach touched on something big there, that this is a big bill. It's covering a whole lot of items, and it's sort of wide sweeping. Unfortunately, the state of our housing market is such that you can't really piecemeal it anymore. We need something of a big, statewide, approach that's going to open up housing, that's going to allow housing to become accessible, that will allow homeowners the ability to do with their property what they choose with their property. That's one thing that this bill does. There's questions, of course, that need to be answered, right? The big scary one at the moment is, anyone could build 8 units on any piece of property anywhere. I think that those fears are a little overblown, though I also sort of get it, that that can be a scary thing. But there's a lot to be excited about here. And I think if we approach it with an open mind, we can see a lot of benefits in the city. In particular, some of our properties that are underutilized at the moment could be opened up, right? If some of the, if this does in fact bring down building costs, if this does in fact open up different types of developments in different areas, perhaps some of our underutilized lots, our vacant lots, our neglected lots that are occupied with heavy quotation marks could become something valuable and useful for the city. So I'm pretty excited very generally about this bill.
I wanted to comment that, Jim, your grid that you sent around earlier today was really helpful, and appreciate that framework. And I think something that we can kind of add to as we're making notes about what we'd like to communicate back to the legislators. As Laura mentioned, if we have a seat at the table, sending a letter with these notes on what we'd like changed and what we support is a really great move. One thing that I wanted to comment on as I was thinking about the fees and the impact to the Batavia School District specifically, that right as it's written, if I'm reading it correctly, the fees are dictated by that formula from DECIO for the ADUs, some affordable housing, and for the supportive living units, not just blanket across all of our development. They won't adjust our fees for our other current development, right? And without this bill, it's likely that the ADUs, the supportive living, and the affordable housing won't be built anyway in our town. So while the fees might be less than our current fees for that stock of housing, we're not going to get that stock of housing anyway if we don't pass this bill. So it's still a net gain to all of our taxing bodies and the fees that they will get. Is my microphone picking this up weird?
Yeah, I would kind of maybe move it away a little bit. Yeah.
There you go.
Am I hearing me weird? Everybody hearing me weird? So I just wanted to call that out, that while the fees...
Yeah, move back from it
Me
a little
being
bit.
back?
Yeah.
Everybody back? Now it feels like it's not getting me at all. Anyway, did that make sense? What little bits you were able to get out of that? Does that make sense that these fees would be new to us anyway? So even if they're less than the current fees that we're doing for other housing, we're not going to get those fees if we don't pass this bill anyway. So it's still going to be a net gain to our other taxing buddies. And this style of housing is not the style of housing that's necessarily going to generate a lot of students to BPS 101 specifically. So that was just one fear that I flagged, and I added a column of my own notes to your grid to add that in.
I went back and read through it some more. I think there's things in there that I can see that would benefit us. But I guess my biggest fear on it is the lack of local control. To try to set up, I don't know that we're going to be able to regulate much of anything if it passes in its current form, as far as, anything other than the lot size that they give, that they say you can build on. So that's one where, I understand people's fear of that, somebody goes in and buys 4 lots that have 4 houses on it, and they can put in 32 units when they're done. That's a big thing that I think we have to really think about, how that affects our utilities, our traffic, our schools. I mean, there's a lot of questions to me that still have to be answered. And I think that it's good that we want to talk about this, but I also think that it needs to be, to me, substantially different when it passes than the way it's written today. Alderman Fehrenbach?
Yeah, obviously, this could be one of these nights where we're going to talk about it for a little bit. Next thing we know, it's 10:30. We haven't left the topic, right? I will just mention, my background, coming from Chicago, a lot of this stuff kind of exists informally in the larger city. For instance, my brother, he's a Chicago school teacher. So is his wife. They bought a house in Chicago, made it a 3-flat, lived in 1 unit, rented out 2, sold that, moved to another one. They basically, they just kind of rolled up while making these single family. Actually, I took that reverse. Anyways, the point is, creating higher density in neighborhoods is not abnormal. But what people miss, if this passes, this will happen. This is not like this passes and we don't get houses converted to eight-unit buildings or torn down. This will happen, right? So that's really my concern, is that we talk about it almost like in ethereal terms, and next thing you know, within 6 months of it passing, we're getting houses torn down every third block, in multi-units put in, because we're an attractive community, right? And quite frankly, we're one of the few communities that still has pre-World War II housing sitting around that's on the verge of being a tear down. And a lot of that's in my ward, quite frankly, right? So it's not like it's not going to happen, right? So that's something we need to keep in mind when we have these things. And keep in mind, the way it's currently written, we have no voice, right? If somebody comes in and they say, hey, I want to, in my property, when I pay off my house, I could potentially build an 8-unit building, move out of state, and just get the rental income to help me retire, right? With this law, that's an option. However, I have big lots in my neighborhood. If I look, just in the 5th Ward on the east side, that's dense housing where I could potentially build 6-unit buildings, right? And I have some of these pre-World War II houses that I could just, smack down and just immediately build a 6-unit building that I can charge a lot of rent for. And I can charge a lot of rent for because it's in Batavia, right? So it's not like it's not going to happen. That's my only caution on this. I don't want to get too much into it tonight because I feel the law is going to change, right? Because I don't see how this passes the way it's currently written. But again, I'll say it one last time, this will actually happen.
I guess my counter to that is, if that does happen, that's a sign that it kind of has needed to happen if there's that much demand, because by not allowing this sort of housing to come into play, you're causing all the rest of the property in town to increase further and further in price, which we have been seeing. This is more of a pressure relief valve than anything. It's been somewhat long overdue. And the advantage of doing this statewide, as opposed to city by city, is that it releases that pressure more evenly throughout the entire region. If we were to pursue these reforms ourselves to try to address the housing affordability crisis, we would be absolutely inundated because we're the only ones doing it. We'd be sticking our necks out. But since this is statewide, it's almost kind of like a mutual disarmament. It's kind of a prisoner's dilemma to want to move first. So this would help to more evenly spread out that development. I know Batavia is a high demand town, but we're not the only high demand town around here. There's also Geneva, there's St. Charles, there's a number of other suburbs in the area. Naperville's very popular as well. I do agree we will likely see some development from this, but I don't think it's going to be as catastrophic as you might expect, given that this is a statewide thing. And that is kind of the trade-off by doing it statewide.
And I just also want to pause every time there is a concern. So what could be something that we put into a letter to our legislators that would help you, Jim, feel better about the density control or the pace of change that might occur? I agree with Dustin that I don't think that this is going to explode overnight and that we're going to have 6-plexes or 8-plexes on Lincoln Street anytime soon. But are there things we could advocate for to our legislators to slow the pace, to control the pace, to control how dense an area gets at once? What is it, in Chicago, they only allow so many, the older people get to only give so many liquor license per ward. We only allow so many of these denser buildings per area, whatever that area is, and put some sort of, just advocate for some sort of local control in that way. Would that ease anybody's concerns?
Yeah, so as written, and to be clear, I think it's important actually for people to actually read the bill, because I think if they hear us talk about it right now, they may think we're joking on some of this stuff. There are no guardrails on this, right? If you don't think a developer is not going to come in and buy 4 blocks on one of the depressed blocks, in the 4th or 5th ward, I think you're fooling yourself. We'll absolutely do that because we're quite frankly the cheapest town to do it in with schools like this. Really easy, right? And not to mention the public services. So the lack of guardrails is the concerning part, right? The most concerning part. You're going to laugh with the ADUs. They passed this in Chicago already, allowing more ADUs, and they thought there'd be this big inundation of ADUs. I think they got 50. right? I mean, so the ADU part, it doesn't necessarily, trigger me or bother me. More importantly, I have aging parents. I may want an ADU in my house, right? For them, or vice versa. I do know people in Batavia where they're seniors and they live above the garage and they rent out their main home, right? That does happen as well. But the lack of guardrails on this is unbelievable. I mean, just from an infrastructure impact perspective, from a neighborhood atmosphere perspective, from a school perspective, even like how many more students is going to generate potentially, right? So as it's currently written, I want to emphasize that as it's currently written, it's really hard to be double thumbs up on this, right? And that's where the change needs to happen.
I'd say just in response to that, just to, again, like the fear of the extreme of 4 city blocks being taken over in the 4th or 5th ward. That's 4 blocks worth of homeowners willing to sell to a developer. What'd you say? I think 4 blocks. Oh, I thought you said 4 blocks. I was like, okay. 4 blocks. I meant 4 houses. 4 houses, sure. Still 4 houses of homeowners that are willing to sell all at the same time. Like there are still some market forces. And again, we are a great community. We have people that have lived in their homes for 40 years. You have people that have lived in the same neighborhood for 4 decades. Let's also lean on our own sense of community pride and community investment, that it's not, I don't think the market is just going to flip like that in a single area.
A similar follow-up. Especially, I do see a concern about utility, especially in places that don't have like water and sewer pickups. If we were going to like make any suggestion, I would do it on that. A special dispensation for places that don't have existing utilities. That being said, in our utility envelope, it'd be interesting to hear what sort of impacts we're especially worried about, because we're about to put in a 72-unit apartment building on 25. Traffic study came back. Oh, it's probably fine, actually. We haven't really heard anything about new water or electric utilities being necessary for that specifically, being especially onerous to do so. That's a 72-unit building, and its impacts on a fairly well-traveled corridor were considered not overly substantial. I think we're thinking about these units because they're a change from the status quo, but the amount of density you get is unlikely to be that significant. If we want maybe perhaps a sort of like block level density limit, or maybe that could be, I'm not a fan of that, because again, there's a point to be said of if this is what's happening, it kind of already needs to happen. But I just don't see it overwhelming our systems in the way that we're concerned, especially with schools. Like, aren't we already a bit studented right now, under capacity? Could use more, I think. So, Fehrenbach?
Yeah. So again, the bill as currently written, right? A building can be up to 6 stories, up to 8 units potentially, right? It doesn't say what type of unit. I can build, 6 to 8 units with 4 to 3 bedrooms, right? You know what the rent on that's going to be a month per unit? It's going to be like $2,500 to $3,000, right? Per unit, right? So
I don't think these are going to be below market rate.
Right.
They are going to be market rate, or maybe even above,
right?
Because it's a product that we don't have.
Yeah, and it's going to, number one, it's going to displace some existing renters that we have in some of these neighborhoods. Second, because they won't be able to afford the new units. Secondly, the reason why I think it will happen more than you think, is that the economics are incredibly attractive, right? Especially if I could buy a home that's quite frankly on its last legs or needs some work, and I could buy it at a relative discount, versus another community like a Downers Grove, or what have you. And then I could put in a 6 to 8 unit, 6-story, crazy, right? Building. It's going to be attractive, and it's going to happen. So that's my take on it. I tell you what, I don't want to be here till 10:30, so I'm going to drop it.
Laura, did you have your hand up? You want to make a comment?
Just a couple of things. Utilities were brought up. So our comprehensive plan and each one of the utilities master plans are based upon our zoning code and expected development that would happen according to that zoning code. So That is something to take into consideration here, but also and I don't need to reiterate the affordability point that Alderman Fehrenbach just made, that, where units get built is going to dictate what the rate that those units go for. They're not necessarily going to be affordable or attainable.
I wanted to let you know, Dustin, that as far as the 72 units there, and there was no talk about any of the output from that or the electric use or anything. We had a multi-story, 300-unit building proposed over here, and that still fit within what we could handle. So I don't worry about the density, especially downtown. It's the overall density, and in a neighborhood or somewhere further out into the system, you're going to have to transfer all that, and you're going to have to power it. And if the power use goes up by 2, 4, 6, or 8 on a piece of property, that's a lot different when that happens throughout a neighborhood somewhere.
For instance, we just had discussion of the Thompson Farm property, and recall that there isn't sufficient sewer out there to accommodate that development, even on 1 acre lot sizes.
Yeah.
So if you can do 2,500 square foot lots, that just can't accommodate that kind of density.
Well, I guess my question there is, that's a good example. If you put a home on a lot out there that would not have sewer going to it, that was too small for that to have septic be viable, we would be able to stop that right now, right? Like
Yes.
if they tried. My understanding of this bill is that multifamily homing would be subject to the same requirements as single-family homing, presumably based on number of units at very least within that framework. I think we would be able to stop it then if we wanted to build a bunch of, multiplexes in a place that literally doesn't have the infrastructure or septic capacity to take care of it. So I think that is somewhat baked into the current rule set. But like I said, if we do have further concerns, I do agree we should express those specific examples of if we don't have existing infrastructure, we would either require a developer to install it or we'd be able to reject them in that case. Kevin?
Alderman Malone?
Yeah, great discussion. I think one thing I would want is also, this is probably asking too much, but some funding to rethink our master plans, right? As Laura pointed out, we have created our plans based on one zoning scheme, and they're kind of pulling that rug out from under us. I think it's okay for us to ask, hey, give us some cash to redo this if we all have to do it all at once. I recognize some of the challenges they face, but we joke that they're broke all the time, but actually the state does have access to funds. The state can fund things. They have funded things, and our fiscal footing isn't such that it's an impossible ask. As for the market rate thing, I mean, all the research across the board that anyone has ever done is that new housing lowers rates. It doesn't matter if it's affordable housing. It doesn't matter if it's super high-end housing. It doesn't matter if it's market rate housing. More houses means the cost of overall housing in the region goes down. It's a supply-demand curve. The research has backed that up for decades. The newest research has reinforced that. So the idea that sort of a luxury apartment being built in Batavia is going to mean that all the renters are going to leave town simply doesn't track the data. That's just not what research shows. That's not the reality of the world we live in. The truth is that the more units you build, the flatter the rate for rent is. And so by allowing more construction, by allowing more units, we are allowing more people to have access to housing, both in Batavia and in neighboring communities. And, if owners want to sell their home to somebody who's going to build some units on it, great. The examples we're using right now are knockdown homes. So either we are going to attract slumlords who are going to rent out homes that should otherwise be knocked down, or we're going to tear down buildings that should be knocked down and build quality housing for people who want to live there. The days of of allowing these houses to molder away, I think should go. And I think this bill goes to it. So sort of the market arguments that are being made, I think aren't tracking the realities of the world we're in, and are encouraging a type of landlordship that I don't think is a good type of landlordship. I don't think we should have people who are renting out homes that should otherwise be knocked down for other types of housing.
Add on to that. Oh, sorry.
Chairman Bach?
Regarding the rental community in Batavia, there is a need for, you're going to laugh, our biggest gap by far is lack of rental housing for people who make the median income, right? All our rental property tends to be either on the lower end or on the higher end. There's almost like no middle, right? So this is middle housing we're talking about. So, these houses will either get knocked down or converted, and you can convert a house in a high-end manner, right? And those renters will move in. So you will see an increase in renters in Batavia. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think you're bringing in a population that currently isn't here, but I don't think people understand the way the bill is currently written. You have no voice, right? If your neighbor wanted to, it doesn't even be somebody from out of town, it can be somebody in town. It can be me, right? I have a nice corner lot. I can currently build 8 units on it, right? This could pass, and I could say, you know what? Sayonara Batavia, I'm out of here. I'm going to build an 8-unit building. I'm going to do 4 units, 6 stories high. I don't think people realize how big that is. 6 stories high, currently how it's currently written. And I'm going to rent it out for, $24,000 a month, right? The way it's currently written, it's that extreme. And my neighbors all around me who've been living in that neighborhood for, 30, sometimes 40 years, can't say a thing. Right? Even worse, I don't even need to go through any sort of zoning with the Batavia. I don't need to go to the Planning Commission. If the Batavia not only is the Planning Commission not even in play for this scenario, as long as I meet the state minimum standards for my proposed building, again, state minimum standards, not checked by any sort of Planning Commission, no one can stop me to do that. Right. So my neighbors could literally have a skyscraper, not skyscraper. Actually, no, I'm sorry. 10 stories is a skyscraper. This is half a skyscraper, right? Next to them out of the blue, and they can't say anything. Worse, I only have to build it to the minimum state standards. Doesn't even need to be nice, as currently written.
I have a response to that. Sorry. What's stopping somebody from building a 6-story, 8-bedroom McMansion next to my house right now?
You can't.
Why not?
Because there's a height restriction from
Not anymore. We got rid of the height restriction, I thought, in the past couple of years.
No, we have height restriction.
Also, just to...
And floor area ratio. We have height
What
restrictions.
is the height restriction? So it's not based on the current neighborhood, though?
It depends on the district. It's either 35 or 45 feet, depending on where you are. 30, yeah.
It used to be you couldn't be taller than whatever the tallest one in within a radius.
There was some of that in the past, yes.
That was
Used to be.
They got rid of that. So now it's 45 feet?
It depends on the zoning district, yeah.
Different zoning districts have different heights.
Not an example, but an 8-bedroom, very large house next to me can still happen right now. And it's not really that uncommon. Like I learned recently there's a 6-room bed and breakfast in one of our neighborhoods. That's really not that much different than a 6-unit, multiplex. At the end of the day, it's still the same amount of car parking. It's still a lot of the similar density, as it were. It's just as one big unit instead of several separated units.
Wait, there's more.
Yes.
So not only.
Okay.
So I don't have to provide any sort of parking, right? I only have to have one half a parking spot per unit, right? So I can build a 8-unit building and only have 4 parking spots, at the building. The rest could go in the street, right? But we don't allow overnight parking, so we have to change that. Even better, to help save on my construction costs, make it easier for me, I only need one door. In the front. I don't even need multi-doors there, right? So I'm sure the fire chief has an opinion on creating a multi-unit building with one front door, right? But that. So again, I think we need to have multiple conversations on this because we could do this a lot, right? I think as currently written, a lot is going to have to change because I imagine this conversation is going to happen around a lot of communities. It's one of those things where you wonder why they didn't come to the cities first before they wrote the law, because I think it would have been better, faster, quicker, to more to the point. But we have to talk about this more and often.
I think we're done here. I'm going to allow some public comment, and then we're going to wrap this up by 8 o'clock so we can move on to the rest of the agenda. So if anybody from the public wants to come up, talk about this, you're welcome to come up now. And all we need is your name for the record.
Hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good evening. My name is Aaron Favor. I'm here to voice my support of the governor's build plan. Let me first introduce myself. I'm an electrical engineer in Batavia and a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. I was a sailor. I served aboard a ship which patrolled the Bering Sea. After completing my service, I attended Southern Illinois University, where I studied electrical engineering, physics, and mathematics. Upon graduation, I was hired at Fermilab. I commute to Batavia every day. My round trip is 2.5 hours. I live in a rural area about an hour west of here. I live with my parents as I slowly save for a down payment on a home. In a properly functioning housing market, this would be a secure path to home ownership. In Illinois, we do not have a properly functioning housing market. It is not uncommon for homes to sell for double or triple their worth from 10 years ago. This is largely due to overregulation in the form of restrictive zoning codes. These codes are overly strict and have been for many years. They prevent builders from building homes which the market demands. I see the governor's plan as a pragmatic, market-oriented solution to increase housing supply. A study of basic economics tells us when demand outstrips supply, prices rise. That's what we see in Illinois. Housing supply is not caught up with demand. But this is more than a study in macroeconomics. Housing affects everything. My generation is putting off raising children due to cost of living issues. Prospective young parents need homes for their children to live in. My story is not unique. There are many young people who can only dream of owning a home. Today, I speak for myself. I command a respectable salary and hold no college debt, and I cannot afford to live in the city where I work. If I am so fortunate, I can only imagine the struggles my peers are facing. I implore to you all, support the governor's plan. It's a good idea. Illinois needs more homes, and we have plenty of room. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Barry Helmer from Ward 4. I think I've been up here once before to talk about housing. We talk about, as a resident of Batavia, I find it frustrating, I guess. I know that, I think staff does a good job. I know they work hard, right? And I know that I keep coming back to is the purpose of a system is what it does. And what does our system do? It's not the intent of any particular line in any particular code to prevent the construction of new housing, right? That's not what staff sets out to do. That's not what council sets out to do when they set the zoning code. But we've had this code for decades with modifications and tweaks along the way. And what does it do? It doesn't produce housing. Right? You can see that in the census data. You can see that in the population data. You can see that in the first ward. There was a mild comment talking about the sidewalks, right? There's no children in the neighborhood. We have residents that have been here for 30 to 40 years. Where are the children? Well, the young families are priced down. My wife and I are very fortunate. I am not only a homeowner here, I own a house that I rent here in Batavia. And there was a discussion of ADUs a few weeks ago, and in my area, it is legal for me to split that into a multifamily home and put an ADU over the garage and do any number of things in theory. But the discretionary reviews I would need to go through mean that I would have to spend tens of thousands, or at least 10,000 probably for such a simple project, to hire an architect to get the plans reviewed, to go through the planning commission, to go through multiple rounds of review with the city, And by the time I've taken my relatively small lot for that rental home, I would have to, and I overlay all of my setbacks, my minimum square footages, my maximum square footages, it's untenable. So there's a house that was built by a very poor family in 1942 that should be demolished, that I will continue to slumlord until this bill passes at the state level. That's the reality of it. With all due respect to Mr. Fehrenbach, there's no contractors to start demolishing and building on every loose lot in the city, or in the state. We just don't have the capacity. At the very least, the overall bill, in my mind, would create an environment where the discretionary reviews would slow. I think I would implore council to, as discussed, write this letter, and I want to know that our representatives from the city that are in the state, I want, as a resident, being represented not just by council members, but by staff discussing with legislators. I want to know, how are we lobbying? I know that this is the first of many discussions, but I caution, getting too far out of these skis, because I think, I know that this is not how most pro-development commentary has gone in the past, but I think that the earth has really moved underneath a lot of folks in the last 5 years, especially in the housing market. So just wanted to be a voice for some, I'm glad there's others here, but we need more housing, and discretionary reviews don't get you there. And that's why I think that this type of legislation is necessary. Places that don't have these types of reviews, like where I grew up in Texas, have falling rents. Rents in Austin fell 5% because they've been able to build housing. Houston, the city of Houston, has no zoning code. Just doesn't have one. Now, you might not want to move to Houston. I didn't, but the world will not end with passage of this bill. The entire city of Minneapolis eliminated single-family zoning, and it was not an apocalypse. It was, rents stagnated. They stabilized. They didn't quite fall, but they stopped going up. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Noel Murr. I'm a mechanical infrastructure engineer. Just in the past year and a half, I bought a 2-flat in Batavia. So I am a small-time landlord. And hearing this discussion, in general, I think I'm for having more housing. Higher density housing is going to help the businesses downtown, which makes my property more attractive to rent. The more small businesses there are. My only concern is, to James's point, please don't let private equity just come and buy up everything, because it really hurts the ability for small-time landlords to purchase additional properties. Because if someone's going to buy 4 houses, that's 2.5 million. That's not Gen Z, so that'd be private equity. Maybe have it where you're not allowed to combine parcels, or there's some restriction in that form. That's all I have. Just don't let private equity run the path. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I'm sure this is going to be first of many discussions on this by the time we get to figure out what they actually put together in a bill form to actually put on the floor and vote on. So I think we just have to stay on top of this, and we'll have to have this as a reoccurring, half hour or hour. We have to dedicate as much time as we need to. And I think, to Abby's point, we need to come up with things we would like to communicate as a council to our legislators, and maybe even that is invite them here so we can talk to them directly in this setting. I feel like that's sometimes something we don't do enough of, is to get them here and talk to them directly, because we all can't drive down and spend 2 days down in Springfield. Okay. We'll move on to 7.6, which would be a discussion on the Energy Task Force. After our very long and spirited discussion last week, we wanted to, kind of come up with an idea of, first of all, I think we have to answer the question, do we want to have a task force attached to this? There was some clarification sent out to us earlier this last week about the fact that this is not due by the end of this year. It's by the end of next year. So we do have more time to discuss this. And again, this is one of those things that we don't solve in 1 meeting or 2 meetings, probably not in 10 meetings. But this is going to be something that we're going to have to go back and work on and make sure that, 1, we're getting what we're paying for with Brattle, and 2, that is articulated well, and that we do hold them accountable for what we asked for, or what we, may change during this process. So I think one thing I wanted to start off with was to make sure that we remember this is a plan, just like any other plan that we have for downtown master plan, our city master plan, the different departments that we have that have their own plans. This is a plan. This is not a contract to go out and buy anything or commit ourselves to doing anything at this point. This is a plan that, we realized that the state was going to do this and enforce this upon us, that we would have to do this. And it's not a bad idea to go through the exercise and to have a plan. So I think it's really important that we do remember that, no matter what we decide is in the plan, it's still up to whatever future council decides what part of that plan they want to use, what part of that plan they want to change, and how they want to implement that plan. So there's a whole lot that's going to happen in the future with this. That being said, I think we do have to kind of take a little pause here and decide how we want to handle that to get us to that first deadline, or that first big step in having to my mind, a very well-articulated IRP that we can follow as a roadmap in the future where we go. So who wants to start?
I'll start. I do like the suggestion because I heard multiple times during the conversation where people didn't really understand some of the language, some of the plan, and I think the offer of staff coming back and breaking it into certain sections and having a discussion about it, so everybody can get on that same page, I think, would be a great thing. I know every time that I go back and reread the plan, have discussions, reaching out to staff, asking questions, I get more clarity, and I think that this is what it is. It's one of those things where you're not going to learn it the first time you read it through. It's something that as you go through, the light bulb begins coming out. So I think because we don't have a rush to absolutely have this filed, because we've essentially done what has been asked of us, I think we take this time, slow things down, and make sure that everybody begins, getting that education here at council meetings. Also, it'll give an opportunity to the community to hear what we're hearing also, and begin having our light bulbs come off. So when we go and make the decision and vote on the final IRP as the council, we know what we're voting on, and we can articulate that to our constituents.
I missed the last meeting, so I didn't get a chance to voice my support for forming a task force to tackle this in the short term and rolling that into a commission long term. I think task forces used to be done in Batavia quite successfully. I mean, there was a downtown task force that was developed pre-Main Street to help do revitalization back in the 90s. There was a task force that did, volunteers that did the Batavia Riverwalk. We have volunteers and experts in our community who are willing to take time to learn and advise and discuss. And I feel like we often, in today's environment, keep them stiff-armed away. And I've seen that repeatedly in my 7 years now sitting here. Geneva and St. Charles both had short-term DEI task forces in the past 5 years. Geneva had a parking task force that lasted 1 year to evaluate downtown parking. St. Charles had a Fox River Dam study task force. Lots of cities employ task forces very effectively, I think, to the benefit of both the decision-making and to the transparency and the trust building that goes into these big decisions. So I know that was the agenda item tonight, was to discuss a task force. I was very unclear after listening to the meeting last week if there was a majority support for establishing a task force, because I think if there isn't a majority support here tonight for establishing a task force, we can be done with this conversation pretty quick and move on with however else we're going to do. But I will say I'm in strong support of establishing a task force.
I also was not here last week, but I did watch most of the video of last week's meeting. And I know Alderman Barron did mention, and I'm sure several other people did too, I just specifically remember her, talking about giving Brattle Group a chance to respond to our concerns that we haven't really heard. But we've paid them a lot of money, and to go back to them and maybe and let them know, like, we need something else. Other options. I think that would be part of what our next steps would be.
Yeah, I think I agree with what everyone said so far, all the way around. I think I do like the idea of slowing down. Again, what I keep coming back to is we own a utility, and that's a big responsibility. I think it's important we take our time, we make sure we do this right, and we do that. And I think the answer to doing that right is all the above. I think we can go back to Brattle. We can tell them, hey, we aren't entirely pleased with what we have. We want some more clarity and so on. At the same time that we have a task force looking at it, making sure that we know what we want, making sure that we fully sort of understand where we're at, and then they can become part of that Brattle conversation. And also while staff is coming back to us and kind of diving deeper into the particulars of the IRP. I know in the email we got from Laura, she mentioned that they do go very deep into the demand side things, demand side options, and that is true. That's a fair statement to make, and sort of pulling that out and making sure that we as council understand what that means, that staff understands what that means, that Brattle understands what that means, and the task force, that we're all kind of on the same page, right? Because we can be saying the same thing, but hear different things. I think that's a great option. So I really kind of advocate for all the above on this. I don't think we need to necessarily pick one and stick to it. I think we can really, do the due diligence that our citizens deserve on this topic.
Yeah, I still strongly support a task force. I was relieved to see that the date is January 2028, so we've got another year. But why wouldn't we take advantage of our community that's fully committed to this? I think, I think Brattle Group missed the mark to the point where we need to make sure they don't miss it again. And a way to do that, because it was our direction and staff that has been communicating with Brattle, and there must have been a miscommunication somewhere along the line, because we have a policy that was not even considered fully. to make sure that doesn't happen again, so we're not up against, and now is the time to do it since we have more time. I fully support that we have a task force to make sure we get the best possible IRP that we can, and we don't come back and then find out that there's still division. When we bring everyone together in the beginning, build consensus, that's when we're going to end up with a general consensus in the end. So I fully support a task force now.
Awesome.
I'm not opposed to a task force necessarily, but I do want to kind of go to Alderman Beck's point that an effective task force would have a lot of definition and parameters around it. What are we forming a task force for? Is it a timeline? Is it a benchmark? Is it an outcome? And then rolling that into a commission. I think a commission is really a long-term strategy that we should absolutely look into employing. But if the majority of the group does feel like a task force is necessary, then I would really like to have some discussion before we convene a task force about what exactly the parameters around that are and what exactly we're looking for from that, so that
I just very much so second that. I hear a lot of discussion that we want a task force. We want a task force. Great. What's their responsibility? What's their role? What's their deliverable that they are going to bring back to council? I think, Robin, I think you hit the nail on the head. And it needs to be very clearly defined. We need to go to those experts that we're paying large sums of money to for the first details. I don't mind supplementing that as well, as long as there's a clear plan in place.
Do we have a date when we're going to get revision 2 from the Brattle Group?
Laura or Max, do you know when we're going to get a revision from Brattle?
So we have had an initial discussion with Brattle, and I had put in my memo to City Council that 60 days, and the reason for that being is that they'll probably take a couple of weeks to incorporate the recommendations that came from your last meeting. They'll send that to us. Then we will need to have time to review all of those changes, provide them with feedback on the changes, whether we feel that they have adequately addressed your concerns or not, and then to bring that to whatever meeting comes next.
I think that's one of the things that I'm worried about is if we're having trouble communicating to Brattle and getting the response we want from Brattle, are we going to do that same thing if we put together a task force and don't very well articulate the focus that we want from them? So I think first we need to fix our problem with Brattle. And to me, we identified a lot when we were here in the last meeting, that we need to at least get what we're paying for from Brattle. And my fear is if we start changing that before we get what we want or add to that, then I think we were going to start this process all over again. And I don't know if that's what we really want to end up having happen, but I could see that happening. Because that, to me, is one of the issues we've had is, we brought up last week, and I don't remember which side it was here, that talked about the fact that we had 4 things in our energy policy, and we only hit 2 of them out of what Brattle brought back to us. But I don't remember when we put everything together from Brattle, did we give them the energy policy? I don't think so, because I think we adopted the energy policy after we, hired Brattle. So I think that's some of our fault. We got to take some blame, because if we're not giving them good information, we're not going to get good information back from them. So I'd kind of like to see that happen. And in that time, then we make the decision, do we want to have a task force to finish out this process to finalize the IRP? And I do agree that I think in the future we need a commission, and it needs to be basically, I think, a utilities commission, and it needs to be kind of project-based. Hey, we need this group of, people from the community couple of us from city council, and a couple from staff, depending on what utility it is. And their job would be to be available to advise us and get that information that we need to make good decisions into a format that we can then debate that to decide what parts we want to use. I mean, I think that to me is the big thing with the IRP. This is really a roadmap, and, you know, this is going to be a very challenging point in this city to be able to get from where we are today to 2050, 2060, whatever date you want to pick. There is going to be an immense amount of changes between then and now. I really think that, you know, we do have to slow down and figure out exactly how we want to handle that, but we also have to be very deliberate and very focused on what we're asking for, what we want them to do, and how we want them to do it. I think that that's really important. Alderman Malay.
I hardly think we've given Brattle the last week's, or the meeting last week produced a comprehensive list of concerns that we had with it. I think that's the exact kind of thing that we could get from about bringing a task force together. Robin, Bob, I agree 100%. If we're going to have a task force very defined, what is the product, when, all the goals clearly delineated. But as we stand now, if we say we expect to hear back in 60 days, hear back on what? Hear back on what we said in in an hour and a half hour meeting? Was there a list? We didn't produce a product, did we? I think that would be the.
I believe Max had a list. He had a list at the end of the meeting.
Everything.
So that's comprehensive. That's a comprehensive list of concerns. I don't even know what it is. Did he share that? Do we know what it is? Do the 14 members of this council know what that list of concerns that are being shared?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Kevin gave some suggestions, Bob gave some suggestions, and it was from each of those buckets, and then I provided some. Everybody was given an opportunity to speak.
Well, I would say I'm not comfortable being able to provide all the feedback on that. I'm not an expert on it. We have some people that will do that deep dive to be able to produce that list, and that can be the product that comes forward. But to just say, oh, no, we're going to give them let's let them try again. Have them try again, but make sure that we support them with all our concerns. And we only get all those concerns when we bring everyone together and define what those concerns are.
I would certainly love for the next draft that comes from Brattle to get to sit down in a smaller group than the 14 of us and have conversations with Brattle too, before it comes to the whole 14 of us again, to chat through it and get that kind of first layer filter to get some of those questions answered, the clarifications answered, get everything presented back in ways that we think will be more digestible. I have a draft of a task force charter. And I have some examples of other task force charters that I wanted to compare and contrast and add my own thoughts to. I just didn't get it to a place that I felt comfortable sending it around before this meeting. But if I get it to that place, I mean, my suggestion would be that we have a document that we're working from that has the deliverables bulleted, that has the purpose statement articulated in a way that we want it to, that it outlines who the members of this task force might be, that if everybody could read it and send me their redlined versions, I'm happy to, or we could just compile it into one document that could be attached to the memo. However, we have to do that for open meetings.
Yeah, we just can't reply
Share
all
it. You
back
can't reply
on it.
all,
Yeah.
but you could all reply to me or whatever we want to do. Or we could just, everybody redline their own version and we go around the room and we ask for our changes to be made here. Again, 14 people at a table, it's hard to write a paper. But however that works, I mean, I can get this into a good place by, the end of this week and send it around for people's consideration, and then we can debate it or adopt it in one fell swoop. It sounds like since we have extra time, then waiting till the next cow is not going to kill us too.
And I think the first question
If I could,
Go ahead.
that's kind of what staff expected city council to do with the IRP itself. was to, if there were questions or if council felt that there were matters that missed the mark, we were surprised only to have been presented with that information last Monday. So in similar fashion, as we're providing recommendations back to Brattle Group about the ways in which the current draft misses the mark, perhaps before even getting to this step of a task force, to have City Council be able to articulate their own concerns about this document. And as Alderperson Beck suggests, we can do that by making smaller group meetings with sections of City Council to be able to provide that more explicit feedback to our consultants.
Has her hand up.
Alderman Lohman? Go ahead, Alice.
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback off what Laura just said. A lot of good points shared tonight. I would like to hear from the council members that are hesitating on waiting until we hear back from Brattle as far as starting the task force now. I don't see the drawback to creating a task force in tandem while we wait for Brattle to give us their response. To me, I see this task force as a way to get further analysis on what has been presented to us. So to me, I see this as an extra layer, offering various perspectives to help us evaluate the pros and cons of both the supply side, demand side options, doing further analysis into what has been given to us. And Laura, you mentioned having smaller groups of council members, which I support, but I think that we're missing the point here of the task force being a smaller group of people that all have education, background, or experience in these fields that are, engineering, environmental, energy. So they are an extra resource of individuals that have, this background. Yes, council still will have the ultimate say and direction and the recommendations. Council will do that. However, having this additional task force, to me, I think is a benefit that benefits the community, gives us more transparency, accountability. It is doing our due diligence in making the best informed decision that we can make as a council. So to me, I really don't see a drawback to having those multiple perspectives from individuals who are qualified and who have this additional lens that some of us on council don't have. And in the discussions that we had last week regarding this task force, it was pointed out that those council members that could be a part of this task force would be those that also have those backgrounds. So it's a specialized, right? It's a specialized group of people that combines staff expertise, council expertise, and community members that have this background to help us make the best decision. And so in my mind, I support that we do this in tandem. I support creating this task force, and I support doing it now versus waiting for later, and agree with the comments that Robin has made and other council members as far as having something in place, having something written with what our asks are of this group, and making it clear that this group is not giving us recommendations. They're not giving us direction. What I would like to see this task force do is to analyze the draft's data, help us with the presented information, and further break it down for us and And as you mentioned, Laura, having smaller groups with council, I suppose this task force, one of the goals can be for them to help break it down for us, whether it be in those special groups that we hold for council or in our cows, pinpoint missing information that some of us without that background might not see, asking critical questions, addressing those gaps that, we identified. Actually, the public, the community helped us identify due to our public comment process, which is great. I support having that, but I do think that this task force would be to our benefit to do a deeper dive and further analyze that. And in a small group, it's easier to have those back and forth discussions, to further information on it.
Just to acknowledge work done. I mean, I think a lot of the conversation that led to this conversation around the task force or commission is because, we had a lot of residents who were working hard to make sure this IRP met what was required, right? And if they weren't pushing us, we probably would not have taken a second look at the Brattle report and gone, hey, really, what is this thing? It doesn't even align with what we were asking for, right? So I think part of this is just, acknowledging that we really do have people who are deeply passionate about this, who are now experts on it, who have been in the dirt for a long time, and their effort has been valuable, as demonstrated by getting version 2 of the Brattle report. So I don't think it's a bad thing by far. Also, while speaking with these folks, this is a lot more involved than I thought initially. I mean, I'm sure other folks, and I worked for an energy trader in Boston for a whole year, right? You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily have time to get in the level of detail required for the long term. So I think it is worth just kicking off whatever the organization has, a task force or commission now. However, I will acknowledge that the real work won't start until we get the version 2 of the Brattle report, because that'll be the deliverable we're paying for, right? And then that should be the starting point, right? So maybe it's we're 70% correct on this side, we're 30% correct on this side, but ultimately we acknowledge the need for outside counsel.
I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I love Abby's idea of putting together some sort of guidelines ahead of time and starting to circulate that. Let's be honest, it's going to take several weeks to get this thing approved, get the participants approved and everything. So by the time that comes through, we're going to start getting feedback from Brattle Group on their revised report. So at that point, we can be doing both at the same time.
I would also recommend the legal review that was suggested in my memo. I don't think that is something, a legal review of whether a document conforms to the Public Act is not something that we should rely on a public task force to complete.
I think what we would task them with would be information, explanation, and dissemination to us, so that way we can make that decision. I don't think we're going to ask a task force to make any kind of decision or recommendation. I mean, I think that's part of what we have to decide, on for a charter for a task force. Alderman Solfa? You there, Chris? You're muted. All right.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to second Laura's comments about the legal ramifications. The other thing is, I also kind of agree with some of what Alderman Barraza said about, why don't we wait to see a little bit what happens with the next round of Brattle. Third concern is all this talk about a task force. Who picks who's on a task force? How big is the task force? Does the task force accurately represent every view in the community, or is it just special interest groups who are being represented in this task force, promoting whatever their particular view is? That's a concern I have about a task force as well. And you know me, I'm always the one who says there's always the unsilent minority and the silent majority. So how are we going to make sure that this task force is representative of the true population of Batavia in terms of the various views? Because everybody does have different views. Nobody's looking at this the same way.
That's why I think it's key that we task them with certain things that aren't about forming an opinion and guiding us to a decision. It's just information. And it's, making sure we get the requirements that we need for the state's requirements for the IRP, that it aligns with our energy policy, and that it fills in the gaps that none of us on this council have the expertise to fill in.
And again, just my only concern about that is making sure that it is comprised of, just like the city council is. There's many different backgrounds, many different views on the city council, which is why I believe the city council works. If the task force is a group of people who've been working together, all have the exact same view and the exact same goal, is it really a task force or is it more of a lobbying group?
Right. I think, we're going to have 4 members. To me, we're going to have 2 off the council, and we're going to have 2 from staff. So I don't know, how we balance that out with who we pick from the public, but I think it has to be somebody that is, interested in this subject, knows this subject, and is willing to put the time in to try to facilitate our decision-making. Alderman Lehman?
Thank you, Alan. You actually kind of just said what I was going to say. Kind of in my opinion, a community task force has already been organically created within our community, and with community members who care about this. And undoubtedly, they're going to stay involved. They're going to stay meeting. They're going to stay connecting with us. And so the task force just gives us the opportunity to be part of that in a more intense way, and to be part of those discussions, and to have a couple members from council who are part of that, and I agree, maybe a couple members from staff. And I think another goal of it for our community members, for our residents, is just an extra level of transparency and accountability in this process, because we just don't want to be, it's too big of a deal to not put extra care into it.
Regarding who would be on this task force, my thought, especially because we're looking especially for technically minded people, not just engineering, but also utility economics as well. I'm an engineer, and I'll admit the utility economic side is a more challenging part for me. So it's a complicated system. I've learned a lot through this process, just researching my own self, because it's a very technical challenge. To me, choosing folks for this task force could almost be like a job interview. Like, we would have a submission period where people would submit actual resumes, and then we would choose on council by a informal closed vote, perhaps, a ranked choice vote like we do, who gets on there in order to meet that representation that we're worried about. That's kind of my envisioning of how that process would go, to make sure that we're all happy with who gets chosen and have it be a fairly open submission process, would be my recommendation. If we're getting maybe a bit ahead of like the particulars, I'm definitely eager to see Abby's framework that she's been putting together, because I think that's done a lot of the lead work for us already. But that would be, I think, how we would choose that, and I'd be curious whatever people thought as well.
Okay, so, yeah, I agree. We can, two tasks can be, working alongside each other. But a couple comments that I've just heard in the last couple minutes. So you're thinking 2 council members, 2 staff members, I don't know, and then we're just talking about all these different ideas about how we put together a task force. So, again, I just want to really reiterate not only what a task force is and what we want it to do, but how do we even form it? Because there's going to be other big issues that come up in the future, and we could have, a passionate, concerned group of citizens that, are pushing a task force idea, and we have to be able to create a system for doing this. And probably the last time that this is going to come up. And so we've already thrown out 3 or 4 different ideas about who would be on it, how would it be formed, and who gets to choose. And so again, I I think that our first step absolutely has to be is to really flush this out before we start, deciding who's going to be on it, or we have to decide how we choose who's going to be on
And
it.
that's kind of where I thought we needed to get to tonight was, okay, are we in consensus that we want to do this? We want to have a task force for this. Whether or not we have a commission moving forward, that's another discussion. But to make that decision, if we're going to have a task force, then it's going to be, okay, the proposal right now is Abby has a format or, a roadmap for that, for us to figure out what we actually want to have it set up as, how we want to set that up as. Then we have to decide how we staff it, how we pick the people that are going to be on it, and then we make that decision and we move forward with that and charge them with whatever we decide is, this is their lane, they get to stay in and they get to do what we ask them to do. And that's really, I think, the reality of where we are right now. And if we are going to make that decision, then I think we do have to take that next step, formally figure out how we set that up with the structure that we already have. And, we've got time to do really whatever we want to do. And I think in the end, the biggest things to me are, we went into this never having done anything like this for an IRP. And we know we're going to have to do it again, so whatever we learn now will help people in the future. And if it makes sense to have the task force and have that help us make a better decision, that's what we should do. Alderman Malone?
I believe Alderman White's been waiting very patiently. So
I'll be really quick. I've heard two people say that this task force would not make recommendations to council, and I've heard a lot of discussion about how this task force should make recommendations to council. So going back to Alderperson Barraza's comments, it's all about that charter. We've had that duality in the last 10 minutes, different people's comments, so please.
Yeah, and so directly to that, I think the task force should make recommendations to council because I think we've also expressed that we want the task force to transition into a commission at some point. It's something I've heard a couple times. I also think is a very good idea. And our Active Transportation Commission makes recommendations to us. Our Historic Preservation Commission makes recommendations to us, so on and so forth. So I do want to begin to build that muscle memory of that. As for how we stand this up, first, I'm excited to see what Abby might be putting together there and what that might come out of. Ideally, hopefully we get people who are, perfect content experts in the field, but I don't know if we need to make that a requirement necessarily. I think what we really need is people who have the time, effort, and interest to sit down, do the hard reading, and can sit and read the IRP and our energy policy and put them together and say, where is this lining up and where is this not? And can I draw the line from energy policy through IRP to action, right? Because that's what, we have our energy policy, the IRP is supposed to be telling us how to do that. And I would like a group who can then come to me and say, here's how you draw a line from there to there while keeping our technical, our non-technical, our community goals and interests in mind. So as far as who's on it from the community, I'd kind of look at each resume as it comes in and say, that seems like a good one. Okay, I weigh these two against each other. I guess we only have 3 slots and we have 4 people, so I'll go this way, right? And sometimes that may end up on the engineering side, sometimes that may end up on a different side. Staff must be part of this, right? I think all the conversations we've had would include staff. That's where I think we will get the legal side of it covered. I don't expect, we vote on it, right? Council, at no point are we saying the task force makes the decisions. And of course, we have good counsel who does on occasion give us guidance on things. Hopefully that guidance is coming in on the task force side. And of course, if it's missed, we'll get it on the council side, but with staff at the table, there's another check to make sure that we get some of that legal input there. So I think we can stand this up pretty effectively and pretty easily, and it would come down to us, the council members, to let our community members know. The folks in the audience here tonight, we know they're motivated. They're kind of some of the usual suspects who thank you guys so much for coming. And I'm sure Alderman Solfa is correct that there's some folks out there who have been silent and have their own opinions who haven't been involved. That's probably up to us, the community leaders, to make sure that they know about it. we find the people we think we like, to put your name in the hat, and let's get this going. As for the next step, I'll finish up here. An aside that I had here, which is going to be sort of self-defeating here in a moment, but one of the advantages of the task force is that it makes long-winded, loudmouth people like me, have to kind of step aside every now and then, right? So that's an advantage that I think comes out of this. I don't get to dominate conversations if they're happening and then I can just vote yes or no. As for next steps, very excited to kind of see what has been out there. I would welcome a draft from Alderperson Beck and have some thoughts. And we could also just do it the old-fashioned way, perhaps put a proposal on the table, second it, and then make amendments kind of the Robert's Rules way, which is a bit tedious, but could also be a way to have public comment and public debate if that's where we need to go.
Thank you, Alan. I would be in favor of kind of moving forward and seeing a draft, but before I would want to vote on a task force, I'd really like to see what comes back from Brattle. I'm okay with kind of going together and getting that set up, but I think that the end product from Brattle, I think is something that we need to take into consideration.
I'll say I don't think this is an end product. I think this is a revision. And I think until we get to the point where we are happy with the product as an IRP, that's when we'll say it's an end product. So I just
want to point out that it's a draft also, that there are still 2 more studies that have to be incorporated into the final draft, which was previously slated to be late summer, but will probably be pushed by a couple of months for this process. But this is the preliminary draft IRP, and the cost of service and rate study information still needs to be incorporated into it.
I do remember when Max initially presented this to us, he said, what we're seeing now is going to be significantly different to what we're going to see in the future. And that is the one thing that stuck with me, that there's going to be feedback. We're going to read through this. We're going to see something we like that we don't like, and that will provide feedback and that we learn along the way.
So we've also, last meeting, we identified several deficiencies that were glaring just to us on our cursory reads of it. I mean, it's not like we sat and read every line twice, and pretty much everybody that was here found something they didn't like.
Maybe you didn't.
I'm not Jim Volk. Go ahead, Abby.
I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Really appreciate the time that everyone has put into this so far. I will put in the draft kind of a trigger point for when maybe an established task force would step in. Like, we've kind of had a few timings thrown out. I'm going to put something in there, and then we can debate that on when and what their first step would be. And I think this is great. And I think that, Alderperson Barron, you mentioned in the last meeting, I think that the process is working. And I think that you're totally right. And I also think that the process has been wonky and weird and kind of a little, Brattle got started before we had our policy. But also, we're the first ones to do this. We started before the policy was written. It's the first time we're ever doing anything like this. And we're going to have to do it multiple times. It's going to be something that we have to perfect. I think this process is wonky and as iterative and maybe as non-linear that we've made it, but the fact that we're able to admit it, I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much about it. And I think that we should kind of just embrace that messiness and get it all out of the way now so that we've got a really good model process for the rest of the state to emulate here moving forward. And I think there are some ideas that will come out of a small group discussion. I may have a couple questions already that I'll pepper in at Brattle or give to the city council representatives that meet with Brattle on how we do this better, how community engagement is done better, how presentation things are done better. I think this whole process is going to be so beneficial for the city of Batavia. So I just appreciate that we're able to sit in the discomfort for as long as we have.
Yep, absolutely correct. The fact that it's messy is probably what makes it, makes it correct. I have something sort of slightly different that I might direct towards Laura here. If we're sort of thinking of an asynchronous drafting process, perhaps we can ask the city attorney, just how can we best navigate asynchronous drafting without violating the Open Meetings Act? Any sort of guidance that the city attorney can give us so that we're not, getting in trouble.
It's a matter of the size of the group.
Yeah, are there mechanisms for for 5 council members to look at one document before it's presented?
We're talking about the charter for the task
draft,
force.
yeah, if we wanted to do like a red line, Google Docs, we can all log in at the same time and add comments asynchronously. It'd be interesting to hear if there are any mechanisms in the Open Meetings Act that either allow for that or what the lay of the land might be there. That's sort of my
I would
question.
be happy to ask the question, but because it is the business of the city that you're working on, I'm not hopeful that there is a mechanism like that. Drafts, you might just want to be working on these drafts on your own and then bring your changes to the next meeting. And then in that meeting, everyone discuss what their recommended changes are.
I think that would probably
You can circulate all those changes amongst yourselves, but you can't have discussions in groups of 5 or more.
And the thing there is, I think that would be best to happen here at a COW meeting, because if it happens in small groups, that's not real transparent.
Oh, sure.
And I'd rather have it here where it's recorded
at the
in
moment
public.
here. Yeah, my question's being misunderstood here. Is there a way to asynchronously draft documents that are accessible to the public from more than 5, 4 or more council members? I'm not asking, should we have private meetings to the side? I'm just asking, is there a mechanism that allows for asynchronous drafting in a public setting?
Like a Google Doc on Batavia's website.
Can we do a Google Doc that anyone can look at while we click on it? That's literally the image in my mind. And I recognize this is new territory, so if the question could just be answered and emailed out, that'd be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Answer on that. Max, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to quickly say was early on in this process, we also had a commercial and industrial town hall where we spoke to a significant group of commercial customers and industrial customers. That is something you may want to consider as you put together this task force, is thinking about what level of representation or consideration those folks would have a role in. Electric utilities can also be a real driver for economic development, as we've seen. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that there is a level of economic development consideration with our commercial and industrial customers. And we haven't heard a ton from them throughout this process, but they certainly pay some of the largest electric bills and whatnot in the city.
11, is it, Max? 11 corporations make up our biggest ratepayers.
I don't recall the exact number, but I know Steve is in the room. But when we look at the load profiles, meaning the usage, some of our large industrial customers use significantly more when you add them up compared to a residential population. So Steve probably can chime in a little more on this.
Yeah, that's correct. If you look at, we have 11 large or 14 large industrial customers that generate approximately 40% of our revenue. The balance of our commercial customers brings us up to about 1,300 or so. That includes the Randall Road corridor and everything. That's over 50%. So residential customers make up the balance, which is disproportionate to what the commercial customers bring in. So I completely agree with Max. We should definitely have their input on this.
The other 2 keys are going to be reliability and cost.
I just have one last question. Sorry, did anybody else? Okay. Is everybody on board still with having the education of the RRP, the different sections of it? I know that hasn't been a big part of it. And if people are still interested in having that smaller, bite-sized groups, or not groups, but education. I look at it as like a 10 or 15 minute, 20 minute.
I think that's really important, because I think then that breaks it down to the point where, okay, if we don't understand it, any one of the 14 of us can ask that question and get that explanation, or, if they can't answer it that night, we can get that answer back out and circulate that to all of us. I mean, similarly to me, I think of the budget, we have questions that get posted to a website. If they don't have the answer that night, it gets posted on the website so everybody can see it, including the public. And I think that's good too, because then that keeps the public in the loop, and that they know what's going on when we do that at a meeting.
And I'll be, transparent. I had an hour-and-a-half meeting with some staff members last week asking questions on the IRP that I had, and I even began it from even non-IRP. I was still confused about solar, and I think that plays a huge part. And I think that was the majority of the time was talking about solar going in and going out, and we've talked about it multiple times, and I think finally the light bulb is has a little bit of brightness. We're at a 35 watt, maybe. So it was really helpful with me being able to connect some of the dots with the IRP and reminding me again, of our corporate customers also compared to our residential. So I'm glad to see a lot of heads shaking for that education. I think it would be beneficial. But again, I don't want it to be hours and hours, 15 minutes or so.
As almost 24-year member sitting up here, I'll say something that I say all the time. You learn something new every day. If you don't, you're not paying attention.
You know what? Quick shout out to the 13 people watching this. I know we have our regular viewership. In case you think we don't need a commission or task force, I would like to point out every time we hit this topic, it's at least 45 minutes to an hour. So it'd be great if we had some dedicated folks who could spend this time even at greater length to get all the details for us and help us make better decisions.
Our next steps are we're waiting to hear back from Brattle on what we articulated or didn't articulate last time, from Abby on a basic layout for a charter for a task force. And then I believe we have a meeting, the next one is going to be the 14th in April. If we can have that on the agenda so we can go through that, whatever information changes, whatever you want to have that ready for that meeting so we can discuss how we set this task force up, what we're going to have them do, and how we're going to staff that, how we're going to put together that group. And we'll try to make that decision that night. And I know we have people from the public that want to talk because they didn't just sit here to listen to us all night. So anybody that wants to come up, we got a few minutes.
Good evening, Susan Russo. I want to clarify a few things, and I actually have a couple questions. It was mentioned that this task force idea did come from the public, and I think I want to make sure that you understand that it wasn't just 4 or 5 of us sitting down and kind of creating the idea of a task force whole cloth. It really grew out of the fact that, number one, we were told that after the public comment period was completed in December, that staff would be going through those comments and questions, formulating answers to those, and of course those were handed out, I believe, last week. And that then City Council was going to review those comments and questions and talk about and give direction to Brattle on how to revise the draft IRP. And that once that advice would come from City Council to Brattle, Brattle would then draft a revised IRP that would come back here to City Council for approval. Okay? So this was a much more truncated process than what you're talking about here tonight. And because we were under the impression that sometime in March and April, you would be having conversations about this draft IRP and making direction to Brattle about that draft IRP, we, quite frankly, didn't feel that you had enough information about the draft IRP or about all of these topics that you're now wanting educational 10-minute classes on, and that the mechanism of a 14-member committee of the whole meeting is such an unwieldy body by which to make these decisions that we started then talking with some of our council members here about the idea of a task force. And thinking that maybe that if a task force was created whereby you would have 2 council members, 2 staff members, maybe 3 to 4 residents, and ratepayers, that then that smaller group could take a look at the IRP, actually kind of condense down into a digestible format, some type of an summary of what does this draft IRP actually say, take a look at the language of the statute that it's trying to, emulate, not by giving legal advice, but, certainly the statute has, like I said last week, does the draft IRP talk about Prairie State? Yes, no, or not adequately? And then certainly getting, legal advice from your attorney if you need it. And then to kind of identify what was missing from this draft IRP. And then compile that, as I said last week, in a playbook, in a guidebook, in a manual for you to take a look at and then be able to formulate a more comprehensive, understandable, and detailed direction to draft about how to revise this IRP. And I think now that, and I know a little bit was talked last week, but now we've got this dual avenue. We were never told that Brattle is going to draft multiple drafts from this point until a final is finally approved by you. I don't see where that economically makes a whole lot of sense to have Brattle keep revising this thing multiple times until it finally meets, the requirements of City Council. And it just seemed like that was the purpose of the task force. That if you could have if you could have this input, a collaborative effort between council staff and ratepayers, that might be a way to short circuit this particular problem. I don't know this idea that Brattle's going to come back with another draft in, what did Laura say, a couple of 60 days? That was never told to us that was how this process was going to work. And I just wanted to kind of make that statement that make that clear. And in response to the weight to be given to corporate ratepayers, business people, there's more of us than them.
Wrong. I apologize.
It would be my understanding that as individuals, there are fewer of them than residents. And, you know, I mean, definitely they should have some say here. But I think that the fact that they pay 50% or more of the monetary amounts into the utility shouldn't be the only factor that gets weighed here. So that, I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
I think I feel like you just kind of put all of what we talked about earlier tonight into a statement from your perspective out in the seats. And I feel like, I think we're both trying to achieve the same objective. It's just that as long as I've been here, I don't think we've ever taken a draft from anything we've ever asked for and approved it in draft form. It's always been changed. It's always gone back to whoever we paid to do it. And we've always discussed and said, you know what? I just don't like that. Half the room said, I don't like that, so it's not in there. And that's the way this works. We are doing everything we think is right as a council to try to make sure that we get the best product that meets the requirements of the state of Illinois for an IRP. And I will tell you, we appreciate the time you spend on it. I know how much time you spend on it. So, you know, we want the input from the public. We want the entire public, whether they're 50% of our ratepayers that are out in the industrial park or, you know, the other 50 that are the majority of the people in town that pay the bill every month. So I think we have to look at all of that in total. And I think it's really important that you understand that we are not going to approve something, I don't care how many drafts it takes, until we're happy with it. And I think I can speak pretty soundly for all of us up here. We're not going to approve something that we're not happy with. So we will get to that point. Steve?
Thanks, Alderman. And Susan, I apologize for interrupting you. That was inappropriate. At some point in time, this entire discussion is going to come down to dollars. And that's why I said what I said, is because we cannot ignore the fact that a very large portion of our revenue is from a very small amount of our customers. And we need to be thinking about that, whatever decisions are made, and even if we just have a plan, there's a lot of information in that IRP that indicates how that is going to all play out with raising rates just by choosing a different energy source. And Brattle didn't get a lot of things incorrectly based on current market conditions. They may just not have been the things that we wanted to hear or hoped to hear. And regarding the timing on this, there are multiple back and forths in the legislation that you did help create. There's multiple back and forths. So I'm not exactly sure what staff did wrong except try to actually initiate that conversation last week. That was the purpose of our meeting last week, was to get the juices flowing and start looking at the IRP from the first value. But I think there was a lot of inadvertent sense of urgency that was placed upon us that isn't there. So we have until 2028 to get this through and think about this and make really good decisions. And I'm looking forward to working with whatever task force gets developed. Thank you, Alderman.
Laura?
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Alderman Wolf just spoke about, which is that when we get a draft back from a consultant, it is definitely part of the ordinary course, number one, that we give feedback and then the document gets approved, oftentimes multiple iterations of that until we get it right. So the fact that is just commonplace and not unusual. It's baked into this process. It really was the next, but that's the reason why we put the document out there for public comment. We answered questions that came in and provided you with those public comments. And then last Monday's meeting was for us to have you review all of that information and then provide us information to go back to the consultant to see what changes needed to be made. So that's right there in the legislation, that was the whole purpose of that step in the process. That's all.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think one thing I heard from Ms. Russo there was sort of the one of the hopes of the task force was that from last week to the Brattle next draft, the task force would sort of be slotted in between there. It would be what we had from last, or 2 weeks ago, I think it was, whatever. It would all be mediated through the task force. We did, I think what I've heard from today is that there is sort of a slight tack in that we are going to get something back from Brattle within, the 60-day window from Brattle while the task force is working concurrently. Though because we have this longer timeline, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that allows us to have the task force provide feedback back to Brattle again, right? So I think the intent hasn't changed from my perspective, and if I'm misreading this, I don't believe the intent of having the task force inform Brattle and inform City Council has changed. I just think the flow of information, we're going to have two flows of information that will intersect again, as opposed to sort of a move forward, stop at the task force, move forward to Brattle. Instead, we're going to get something from Brattle while the task force works. We're going to see what Brattle has. Task force is going to feed back into that and back and forth. So I hear you, I think is what I'm trying to say, but I think we're attempting to reach that vision in sort of just a slightly different way, though I think the intent is there.
Alderman Solfa.
Yeah, just in follow-up to that, I'm not sure that there's been any decision that's been made that we're having a task force initiated right now. At least, I know Alderman Malone always likes to say this is what I think I've heard. I don't think I've heard anybody say that we're forming a task force right this moment. I've heard many different opinions voiced about what's going on and what the process is and what the progress is and what the timeline is, especially in light of the fact that we're now in 28. So I just don't want any misrepresentations made that there's been decisions made about these things already happening when I don't think there has been a decision made in that regard.
I think we've got consensus in this room right now. I know you're not here, Chris, but I think that there's a consensus that we are going to discuss forming the task force and what it exactly will entail at the meeting on the 14th in April.
That's fine. We can discuss what a task force may be and who may be in it, what their role may be, but I'm just not. Yeah, I guess we can discuss that more later. We've already had a lot of discussion on that tonight. I think we've kind of beaten a dead horse right now.
And I'll just signal my intention. I plan to make a motion at the April 14th, to adopt the task force. That'll be what I intend to do. So I suppose if we want sort of the formal, yes, we're doing it, I hope that we have something that I or other people can motion into existence. So if Chris, you're looking for sort of the go point, that'll be my intention to see where the council actually falls at that point.
Yeah, this is where my problem is. We're just going to vote for a task force when I've already said I'm not sure how we're going to form that task force. Who's going to select the people to be on this task force? What exactly the task force is going to do, what their role is going to be. I know Alderman Beck has said she has some type of an outline that she's created. Who's to say everybody's going to agree with that outline as well? I mean, I know she said she's going to circulate it. Everybody can comment on it. But I mean, this whole amorphous, we're going to vote on a task force. Let's have a task force. Okay, we're voting. We have a task force. What is it? How is it made up? What's it supposed to do? I mean, these are the things that I'm concerned about just saying, yay, let's have a task force.
There will be drafted language that you can say you like or you don't like. So I think if you don't like it, vote no, right? I think that's how democracy works.
Have you seen the language already, Alderman Malone?
Well, no, that's what's coming the 14th. We'll have language on the table. on the 14th.
I'm just wondering if you've already discussed it. That's all I'm wondering about.
No, I mean, here we are discussing it now, right? Discussing it right now today.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Could you, how is that discussion going to be? Is it going to be put on the agenda as a discussion? Is it going to be put on as a resolution? Is it going to be put on as a ordinance? I'm just going to come from my standpoint, something that is being discussed that night in draft form. I'm not comfortable voting on that because I want to have some time to be able to give some suggestions and then have the updates and then be able to, think of it and make sure that that is something that I'd be comfortable with if we're moving forward with that. This idea of trying to rush stuff into voting doesn't make for very good opportunity for everybody to have their voice be heard. And I think that this is something that is important for everybody to be able to speak on and everybody to have their suggestions added, if that is something we're going to move forward with.
What I was going to say is this will be a discussion, and if we do approve a framework that is something that we like for that, then it will have to be decided, does that have to be in the form of a resolution or an ordinance? It has to go through legal before we could actually legally form that, would be my understanding. Would that be correct, Laura? Is that
Yes.
would be the steps we'd have to go through? So after we go through a discussion, if we're all okay with that and everybody says, fine, the majority says okay with that, then it goes through whatever it has to legally then become either an ordinance or resolution that would form that with everything documented in that. And then we would vote on that, which would go back to a COW for another discussion. And then if it's approved from COW, it would then get moved to the council to vote on it.
Yeah, like I said, I'm hoping to get like the rough language out to you this week. That's 2 weeks almost or more to chew on it and bring feedback to that meeting. And then I certainly wouldn't want to vote to approve anything that wasn't then attached to an agenda, a future agenda that gives the residents time to stew on it, chew on it, give us feedback. We'll notice things that we didn't realize in the meeting, and then it comes back to be voted on.
Thank you.
I don't think
That's how we've done it in the
right,
past.
and I don't think we want to rush anything. I mean, especially now that we know we don't have to have it done this year, the IRP done. So I think we need to make sure that we are very deliberate in what we decide to do with the task force. Okay. 9:12. We can then move on to city council updates, project status. Laura?
Sure, just a few things here. Wanted to give a shout out to our great team in human resources. One of the things that they've done over the last couple of years is organize opportunities for our employees to do service projects in our community. And last Thursday, we had a group of 30 volunteers who went to Feed My Starving Children, and we packed almost 10,000 meals that morning, enough to feed 27 children for an entire year. So really proud of everybody who participated in that, and thank you to Human Resources for their efforts in organizing that. We also, in Public Works, we continue to have malfunctions at the railroad crossing on Redant near the Public Works facility. We've been in contact with BNSF trying to troubleshoot what's going on there. They determined that this typically occurs when salt gets on the sensors. So Public Works and police are working together to resolve the issues as they occur. And we're working with BNSF about how to prevent that from happening in the future. Another group I want to give a shout out to is our electric crews. The strong winds that we had, not this past weekend, but the weekend before and early last week caused a few outages, and actually a ComEd pole that was located behind North Van Nortwick homes needed to be replaced on an emergency basis on a Saturday. And the electric crews really did a great job getting services restored quickly, and coordinating with ComEd to get that work done. Also, the project at Michael Wild Park, the tree removal is complete. I know we did get a couple of concerned calls from residents about the trees that were being removed, but I think once we talked through that project with them, they were very happy to learn about the improvements that are being made there, again, with a GEICO grant of over $500,000. The drop box for utility payments at City Hall is going to be relocated to the roundabout. We've just had too many incidents with it being damaged in the west parking lot at City Hall, and so we're going to try a new location. Signs will be out there to direct residents to the new location. Also, bids were open for the water main replacement project on Mallory. And just to let everyone know that we are utilizing the TIF number 4 funds. And this is expected to be on the April 14th committee of the whole agenda. The police department received and accepted a grant in the amount of $487,695 that will help offset the costs associated with the department's newly acquired Axon body-worn cameras and Axon Fleet 3 in-car cameras. The grant is administered by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, and staff will be requesting a budget amendment to pay the full contract value for 2026 in order to accept the full granted amount, thereby eliminating the need for any ongoing payments to the vendor. So really proud of the efforts of the police department, who worked along with our contractor ACS in order to secure that grant funding. In the fire department, we had a nice turnout for the preparedness class that we had last week. We had 15 people who attended that. And that's all I have for project status, unless anybody has any questions.
Questions tonight? Alderman White?
2 quick comments. I saw railings getting installed on the ramp across the river. Always exciting to hear about that. And if you're out in Winding Creek like I am, they have started work on the park out there. Critical stuff, I know.
You know, in the other business category, in mid-January, we had a presentation around the South River Street corridor plan. One of the manufacturers showed up. He was pretty upset for, for some pretty good reasons not being included in the plan. I'm going to have dinner with him next Friday. I'll get the feedback, send it back to the council just to kind of know what they're
else? Okay. Thank you. And now we need a motion to go into executive session for threatened litigation and purchase of real estate.
Second.
Motion by Malay, second by Malone. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We'll take a 3-minute break and start at 20 after.